Hi everybody. Hope you're all well. Uh, I decided to do this little video clip, basically because I wanted to share some of my own experiences recently, and obviously in the past lockdown, we've all been finding other ways to occupy ourselves creatively as well. So recently, I began to dabble in a couple of things. One was dabbling with portraits. One reason, I suppose, for that was the fact that my mother passed away, and I felt that I was going through lots of photographs the family were, and I thought it might be nice to attempt a painted portrait of her somehow. And I suppose it was a combination of dealing with the loss, but also trying to find a way to depict her in a different way other than photographs. So that got me involved in looking at things like that. It led me then to work on a self-portrait as well, and so on. And it's just because sometimes we need to set ourselves challenges. I hadn't painted a portrait for some time, and I thought, set yourself this challenge. It has a meaning to you anyway. So that's what motivated me. And I suppose maybe at this point, I should encourage you to think that way. Try to step out of the box. If you've got into a routine of painting or making art in a certain way over and over again, and maybe becoming very comfortable with it, sometimes circumstances make you have to try something and keep your brain ticking over in different ways. So that's what happened to me. The second part of the thing for me was that I also wanted to work on a very limited palette. I wanted to challenge myself because recently I've been doing paintings that are quite colorful, and I love color, and as anyone who knows me knows that I love using color and quite expressively and all of that. So I thought, here's another challenge. Make yourself boil down the number of colors that you're going to use in your painting. So in a way, lockdown and time to think sometimes also gives you time to think about how you challenge your own mind. So there were two things that I set out to do. And what I decided was I'd been looking at what is known as the Zorn palette. And for some of you have seen other videos of mine and been at classes and whatever, you've probably heard me talking about it, and something many of you might already know about the Zorn palette anyway. But it was created by an artist whose name was Zorn, obviously. And he boiled down his palette of colors to essentially four, I suppose. White, black, vermilion red, and yellow ochre. And from that, he developed a palette. So I thought I will challenge myself and use that palette with my portraits. And so what I want to show you first of all is are the kind of results that I was getting you trying that. So if you bear with me, I'm hopefully going to share this screen and let you see. This is my little mother here, and what I want to show you is that all of the exception of the hat, okay, which you can obviously see has a blue in it because it was from a photograph of her at a wedding, and it was a very particular hat. So I confess that I introduced blue there, but every other part of the skin and the face and the rest of the picture is using the Zorn palette. Okay, so you're looking at four colors, two of which are black and white, to work on this. Okay, there is my self-portrait, very cheerful as always. But every single bit of this painting used the Zorn palette, black, white, red, ochre. So I'm not sure how good the quality of color in this video is. I hope it's good enough to let you see the range of sort of skin tones and lights and darks and even greens that are going on in there. So I was quite happy with the range of color I achieved with that particular painting. This one is one that I kind of still working on. It's actually my mother-in-law, who again sadly passed away 2 or 3 years ago, far too young really. But again, yes, you can see, I confess, there is blue in her scarf and there's a little blue in the sky. But the head and skin and hair, the main body, as it were, the painting, is again using the Zorn palette range to create those sort of tones. So I wanted to show you those first of all. The Zorn palette doesn't necessarily apply only to skin tones and flesh tones. It can apply to landscape, and I've been playing around with little small doodly little landscapes with the color range, and I maybe get to show you at some point. But it's quite feasible to use it for virtually any subject matter. So now what I want to quickly do is swap across, I hope, to another camera here. I've squeezed some of the colors out I've talked about. I've got a little palette knife, and I'm just going to simply stir around some to let you see some of the range that you get. And that's really all, you know. So if you bear with me, I'm going to attempt to swap cameras. You will probably hear me fumbling around to get over to the other part of the easel or whatever here. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to do that right now. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing the palette and the piece of paper that I'm going to work with. I'm just going to turn this monitor around. You can see the struggle that I'm going through. However, you can see here, you'll see my hand, there we go. And again, I hope the light is reasonable on this and it gives you some ideas. But I have white, I have ochre here, I have vermilion red, and I'm going to just about now squeeze a little bit of black down the bottom there. You can see that. And I'm going to put some colors on this piece of card beside this. I'll just slide this piece of card a little bit closer. So obviously I'm going to work through permutations. So I'm just going to work through the top two, the white and yellow and so on, white and red and so on. So I'm going to take a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow, and you can see, well, obviously where we're getting in the ochre, but I haven't added too much yellow ochre because I think that's one of the things with color. We overestimate. It's like recipes. We sometimes get carried away and dump in too much of the herbs or too much. And you can see that tiny little bit of ochre has given me quite a nice, soft, potentially skin tone there, you know. So I'm just going to grab a little towel here to wipe my palette knife. So now let's simply work down to the next one here, which is a little bit of white and a tiny little bit of our vermilion red. And you can see that's really quite strong pink, really. And look how little red I put in. I don't know if you saw that, but it's really, really very little. But I'll put that down beside the yellow ochre mix. And you can see there, obviously that's quite a severe, you know, if we were talking skin tones, we were saying these are a little bit extreme, but certain parts of flesh and cheeks might have small amounts of that color. It's something I did become aware of when I was working on my own things there recently. So working down again with white to start with, and this time of course black. So that's our last color there, and of course we know we're going to get a gray. So, and this is where the dilemma happened with regards to Zorn. People were saying, well, what does he do for blue? But the interesting thing, and I don't know whether it's maybe even working here, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go back up to the yellow that I put on here I'm going to put a little bit more round there. I'm just going to make a little sort of surround of it there and there and there and so on. So I'm kind of making a little arc there, and I'm going to take a little bit of the gray that I've just made with the palette and sort of put that in there. And when you see that in relation to the yellows and maybe even the pinks, it will take on a bluish hint. It will take on the complementary. So if you have an orangey yellow and you put gray beside it, gray will appear to take on the complementary of that color. I'm actually just making a slightly lighter gray to see how that works as well. And again, I understand it with the camera I'm using, with the light we have today and so on. But you can see maybe the difference in those colors there, those grays. So there's a bluishness that happens with gray, and that's what Zorn did to substitute, if you like, for blue. So we've actually mixed there white and yellow, white and red, white and black. So we've mixed the first permutation. Then if we go to the yellow, so if we take our yellow ochre, what I'm going to do here, if you bear with me, is just wipe a little bit away here so that I can just keep using the same area. So this time I'm going to take a little bit of the ochre. It's quite strong, really. And to that, I am going to add a little bit of the red, okay? So a little tiny bit, you can see there how small these area bits are, you know. And you can see how that's becoming, I hope you can see it's becoming like a brown. And again, I'll put it over here beside that gray, and you can see that slightly fleshy sort of brown, probably like a burnt sienna type of brown. And of course, if we vary the amounts of each color, you know, and this is another thing that we could do in another 2 or 3 hours it would take. But, you know, we know that, for instance, if I add a little more red to this mix, so the red is increasing, the yellow is slightly less. And I'm going to put that down beside that one. You can see, I hope, the lovely rusty going towards what sometimes termed Indian red or one of those colors. But you can see the variation. So between those and those and so on, you have a million possibilities. And of course, we can add more yellow or add more red so that balance out those. And then, not to mention, of course, we could add white. So I'm going to stir white into the mix that I've just made. Quite a lot of white, and you can see that lovely fleshy sort of tone. And you can see that there, that sort of pinky tone. And the thing is, we could then, we'll just work through this before I want to say the next bit, to be honest. So we've had yellow and red. So let's have the yellow with the black. So again, I'm going to try to cop out a little bit here and save space by wiping a little, clear a little area by wiping it. So now what I'm going to do is our yellow, again, yellow ochre, and now a little bit of black into that. Again, you can hopefully see not too much. And what you'll see is a color beginning to go towards a greeny tone. You can see it down here, like a khaki color. You see that? And again, depending on the amount of yellow and the amount of black, you'll get different variations of this greenish tone. And of course, as we did before, if I added white to the mix, we suddenly lighten this sort of greenish tint. So we've got something like that. And again, if I, let's just say, for the sake of it, while I'm here, if I add a little more black to that. So really, it's going a more muddy gray, but it's not a black and white gray in that sense. It's just another variation, if you like, of a greeny range. It's a colder green, if you want to call it that. You can see it there. So you have a little clump there of ranges of green. And Then we finally, I think, if I've got this right, we have red and black. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to cop out and rub a little space and take my vermilion red. You can, I think, use, my understanding was vermilion is what Zorn used. However, a lot of people say, look, cadmium red will do that. I have a feeling, though, that vermilion has a certain purplishness, for want of a better word, a pinky purplish, a vibrancy that cadmium doesn't have. And I think it gives you other things maybe that cadmium. However, I've used cadmium, to be honest, at times, and it's perfectly good. Anyway, now I'm going to add tiny little bit of black there. You can see that. Stir that in. And of course, what you're seeing, we get another variation of a reddish brown or purple. So if I put it up beside the grey there, you can see particularly there's a purpley tint, you see right in there. Hopefully you're going to see that. So, and once again, if I was just for the sake of it stirring in some white into that, you get this pinkish purple color. And I think that's why I think for me vermilion does work, because it contains that slightly mauvey feeling to it. You can see that lovely color we've got there, which is a very much a mauve sort of thing. What I want to do now, and you know, I could go on like this all day, literally, because obviously for every one of these I've made, I could add white and I could add black. So for each of these colors, I could have variations of different saturations of them. But you can see a basic range there beginning to develop. Now, what I'm doing at the moment, I'm going to slide this page around so that I have a clean area. And one of the things is, what I'm inspired by was I was reading in a newspaper recently about the issue of a color that you can buy in the shops called flesh tint. And it was interesting that there were a number of people who were unhappy with the term flesh tint, because it tended to suggest white skin or light skinned people. You know, when you talk about flesh, you talk pink, and that is a very interesting point, you know. So this business of making skin tones, you know, of course applies to people with all various skin colors and tones. So the Zorn palette obviously is quite capable of that. So obviously someone with a darker skin, you're obviously adding less white in a lot of cases. But you saw maybe previously, if we begin, for instance, with our reds, as we did before there, and a little black in that, you can see, as we did before, you've got a starting point for tones. If we're talking portraiture here, which are darker skins, you know, darker skin tones, darker skin hues is the word I was trying to find there, you know. That's got an underlying pinkiness. And remember, you see that, now you might think, well, maybe that's too pinky dark, if you know what I mean, too pinky. It's all right in tone, but it's maybe too warm. You might want to add a little bit of yellow ochre. And this will be almost like a complementary color. If I stir that in, I don't know if you can see the difference in the light. I know the light's changing as I speak here, but as I add a little bit more, I'll be quite bold about it here so that maybe it shows up. Maybe I've overdone it there. Go back to my reds. But you can see there I moved it away from the redder end of the dark scale of tones to this nice rusty color there, you know. And of course, again, as I've said before, with little bits of variations of white, because obviously if you're dealing with skin tones and you're dealing with people catching the light on their forehead or their cheeks or whatever, then you're going to have really quite strong highlights. So if you take, I'm adding more and more light there, more and more white to get better tone. So I've got a range now falling from there all the way down to this really dark color. And of course, I haven't even begun to really introduce dark, deep tones. So let's say we go back, and this time we begin with a black tone, a black color. So instead of adding black, you might begin with black, and then you're into really severe color. So if I added small amounts of red to this, so black is a dominant color. I'm just checking, as far as I remember, it's ivory black I'm using. So this is basically a black that has been slightly warmed up, and the camera may or may not, sort of pick this up. It might just look black. I'm trying to scratch it so you can see a hint of warmth in it, and I hope you can there. But again, there's another range in the darker tone range of what we might want to call flesh color or skin color or whatever. And for each one of these, there's a million possibilities. I'm going to take some of my white here and take tiny little bit of yellow ochre, and you can see that's a bit like the very first thing we began there. And now what I'm going to do is add considerable amount of gray or dark or black, I should say. And we're now getting a gray, but it's not a bluey gray. It's going to be slightly more greenish because I've added yellow into it, obviously. So yellow and black tend to make a green. But I started, I added tiny amounts of it. So it's essentially looking like a gray color. And if I put it down there, you see that? That gives us a neutral, colder version of these colors. And if you look, and if you're dealing with portraits and you look at a face, looking at the light, and the light's catching one side and not the other, you'll have a warm and a cool side. You'll have warm shadows and cool shadows. So if you begin that way, this can give you a range. So now what I'm going to do is add a little bit of red into that. And you'll see this, I hope, becoming slightly warmer beside that. You see the difference in those two? And of course, so it goes on and on. So I can make a range of colder variations of skin color, or it doesn't need to be skin color. It can be stones, it could be rocks. It just happens because I've been talking about portraits there. But you can see this range that we have going on in the, if you like, the deeper end of the spectrum, the darker end, which might be for darker skinned portraits and so on. So totally, we have a very interesting range, and you can see the challenge here. And to be honest, it is honestly quite fun to do this with 4 colors, 2 of which are black and white that we very often use anyway. So when you think of it, it's yellow and red are the 2 key colors, if you want to put it that way. One final thing you'll notice, I know that not only do you have this range of limited color, but it's important to notice that if you look at the colors in terms of their tone, you'll find this interesting, because the lightest obviously is white. So let's just move this so we can do this in order. So the lightest tone will be white. So I'm going to scrape some white on there. The next lightest tone will be the yellow ochre, I should say. Then going down to slightly deeper tone, don't know if I've got enough of it here, is the red. And then of course the final one is black. So not only did Zorn create this range that has a combination of warm and cold, but it has a perfect set of tonal values. So in other words, if I took a black and white photograph of that, I would see dark, slightly lighter, lighter. So he's got a full range, tonal range, as well as color range. So hopefully you find that little experiment, or that little sort of exercise, worthwhile. What you're hearing is me cleaning my hands and making my way back, hopefully to change camera again. So if you bear with me, I should appear at any moment. There we are, still in one piece with very messy hands. So hopefully that is of some use to you. Have a look at it, but like everything else, try it. Don't just look at it and say, "Well, that's great." If you're a painter, getting out there and paint, get out and do that and learn about your medium and learn about the techniques that are there, and you become better. So enough of my preaching. I will leave you with that, and good luck and take care, everybody.